Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. I'm Michael Marchuk.
And I'm Brad Hairston.
And this is our weekly pulse check on automation and AI news. Guys, before we get started, all the links for these articles that we're going to be covering today are in the show notes. And Brad, let's just jump into it right now with one that's going to get our everybody emotionally charged. And that is, in this article on Wired, OpenAI warns users could become emotionally hooked on its voice mode. Now, if you've seen some of the videos that have been out there and posted, you'll see how they're testing this and showing people talking to OpenAI. And I've even seen some where they've had two versions of OpenAI talking to each other and having a conversation, which is quite interesting. But they're saying they could get emotionally involved and emotionally attached to this. What are your thoughts on that in this article?
Well, I've brought it up before, but I think about the movie Her when this kind of thing comes up. And the article even mentioned Scarlett Johansson and the controversy with OpenAI. It's just an interesting side to the whole risk topic. We risk are talked about incessantly when it comes to AI and specifically Gen AI. And now it's like we have a whole nother category that has emerged that relates to voice activation. OpenAI bringing that into ChatGPT 4.0, and they mention several things that are really interesting, like the fact that they're worried about anthropomorphism. They're worried that people are going to put too much trust in the answers that the model that ChatGPT is bringing back because they're swayed, they're emotionally charged by the voice. They might be persuaded in a direction more than they would have just reading a result. So you can see how it's creating all new risk and considerations for the AI companies to think about, for the regulators to think about. Stuff that I never even thought would happen. This article was very interesting to me and kind of caught me off guard. The other thing I'll say is some of the people that they said piloted 4.0 initially said the voice was too flirtatious. That's hilarious. So yeah, I think it opens up Pandora's box in a whole different direction. And, I think, I don't mind the voice, making the voices a little bit more, emotional, a little bit more natural. I even noticed on my Siri, on my iPhone, Siri's voice has changed. I asked her something the other day and it responded, mm-hmm. It didn't say when I called out to Siri, it didn't say yes. It was like, mm-hmm. And I thought that was pretty funny. I hadn't heard that before, but so yeah, AI is becoming softer, gentler, kinder. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, maybe they should think about putting like Danny DeVito's voice in or something like that. So it's not the same kind of emotional charge to it. It just might be a different kind of emotional charge to it.
Yeah.
So going
exactly.
from current state, cutting edge AI voice interaction, let's talk about this very, very recent article from the Financial Times that talks about advances that are really affecting the private equity space. And what I thought was interesting about this article is that it started bringing about an application that's been around since the late 1980s called VisiCalc. And I thought it was insane. They talked about this spreadsheet program, VisiCalc, which then turned into Lotus 123. And now we have Microsoft Excel, etc. And the reason they were bringing that up was related to the current state of the private equity market and how analysts are continuing to use this kind of tool. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm not terribly surprised by that. I think some things will take longer to change than others. And, the article talks about these junior analysts pretty much live and die by spreadsheets. That's just the world they live in. I've got to believe that's going to continue. I think there's other things though that will start to, kind of seep into their world and really change what they're doing. And I'm thinking about the first Gen AI demo that our company did right after ChatGPT, and it was focused on private equity. So focused on researching companies that were acquisition candidates. And we demonstrated how a digital worker could take a company name and then go out to a variety of LLMs and pull in data and then format it into a nice templated report that normally would take a junior analyst 2 weeks, 3 weeks to put together. And here's a digital worker doing it, leveraging Gen AI in a matter of minutes. So I think that's the kind of thing that maybe will start to take hold more so than replacing these models. I mean, they mentioned a few different examples. They kind of talk about current day. What are some of the automation things that are creeping in? But none of it was terrible. It sounded to me like stuff that's been around for 15, 20 years. So I didn't read anything in that article that told me that there's really, really new and innovative things that have come into that sector. This article, when I first saw the title, I'm thinking, okay, they're gonna talk about automation and AI and how this sector is embracing it. It didn't give a lot of that meat. There was not a lot there for me to grab onto. So I don't know what you thought, but that was kind of my takeaway.
So yeah, again, the title of the article is "Automation is Coming for Private Equity's Junior Roles," and you're right. I didn't find a lot in there because some of the applications and stuff that they talked about really were related to, like I said, maybe some older applications that have been around for a while, more heritage like legacy. But even on our podcast, we interviewed just recently someone who's got AI doing similar roles as these private equity junior roles would imply in terms of going to do company research and formatting reports and that sort of thing. That's happening at scale now.
Right.
That's available for these larger investment houses to be able to leverage for their own use. So these things are happening right now, and I see that this is going to be more and more the case where we're taking some of that drudgery out of finding the data and formatting it and going back to the analysis of that data to determine whether or not it fits a portfolio or whatnot. So anyway, it's interesting, very interesting where it's going.
Yeah, so, no doubt.
And finally, from our third article today, this is one that's everyone should be concerned about. Anyone who's in software, but anyone actually who uses AI should also be thinking about this. This is from CNET, and the article is called "Europe Has Put Its AI Act into Effect: What It Means for You." So the basis of this article is talking about the very recently released AI Act in the European Union that has some very, very heavy fines on it if the requirements aren't made. I mean, to the point where a quote from the article is, companies that violate the act will be fined as much as 7% of their annual revenues for 35 million euros, which is about $37.5 million. So that's a very significant fine for this. So what were your thoughts as you read through this?
Well, first question, is the fine the greater of those two or the lesser of those
or
two?
Is it capped at 35 million euros? I don't know. Regardless,
I would
it's
think
a huge fine.
It's still big, but for some companies, 7% of their annual revenues is going to be a lot more than that. Yeah, this stuff took effect about 2 weeks ago now, I believe, and clearly it's having some impact. A couple of the big players, Apple and Meta, it's already affected their rollout schedule in Europe. And not surprisingly, both of them have written letters of protest to the European Union, or maybe they're just trying to get clarification. But to me, the article, it brings more questions than it does answers. It's a very kind of high level and nebulous first move in terms of trying to regulate AI. The overarching act says that tech companies must ensure that AI systems introduced in Europe are safe, transparent, non-discriminatory, traceable, and environmentally friendly. That's a lot. And
Wait,
but it's not.
before we go on, can you say that about people? And that's how I look at it. I mean,
Probably
this
not.
This is a tough act, actually.
It is a tough act. So, yeah, I haven't read all the regulations, in detail, but the article does say that there's already lots of ambiguity and a lot of lack of clarity around how it's impacting certain audiences. So, like, U.S. users are not sure how it's going to impact them if they're doing business in Europe. It's not really specific about that. You think about like GDPR and how that impacted U.S. companies doing business in Europe, but in this case, I guess they didn't specify that as well. And then it's also unclear whether a non-EU user who travels and uses some of these AI technologies, will they be able to access them in the European Union? If you go over to Switzerland tomorrow, are you going to be able to crack open Claude and do stuff that you've been doing in your for your job or in your spare time? I mean, that's the kind of question. It seems it's pretty basic, but apparently people don't know the answer and they're scratching their heads. So yeah, I think I applaud the fact that they've moved first and they've put some stuff out there. They're not just waiting until it's perfect or waiting until they have, every I dotted and T crossed. And the Americas or the US in particular has not done anything yet. So, kudos to Europe for doing this, but clearly there are more questions than answers. And, it remains to be seen how this will affect the big tech companies, the big Gen AI and other AI, providers. But that's fine. Wow. I think if I were them, I would be reading up on it. I'd have my lawyers staying up every hour of the night to figure it out and go back and get clarity, because you don't want a fine like that.
Well, I suspect this act was primarily targeted towards the very largest tech players because just because of the way that it works, right? These are the same companies that are investing to create these platforms. So this is probably that warning shot for them. But yeah, it's interesting now how AI has brought up so many legal discussions. We've talked about it before on the podcast related to intellectual property and copyright laws and how these things are yet to be decided. It's a very interesting technology in terms of how it's been evolving, but prior technologies didn't really have this level of scrutiny, especially when it came to creating laws specifically related to that technology. So it'll be interesting to see where we go, certainly, but I see this as the initial start, and I believe you're right when they're putting this out there as a first mover, and if nothing else, there's a line drawn in the sand for someone to now litigate and hopefully clarify some of those activities or those mentions in the act to be able to allow companies to actually work with them. So very interesting times ahead for this for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those are our 3 articles for today. The links are in the show notes. So I hope you're all subscribing, and we will see you on our next Pulse Check.